The Yankees have lost 7 in a row, and Aaron Judge, who is on the IL and is the captain, doesn't usually call out his teammates publicly, but he said they have a lack of focus right now and they need to get it right.
I'm looking to the bullpen to bring my lefty in. Keep the lead and make your team look pedestrian. It's in your wheelhouse, we'll swing for the fence. You know it's money around here, and I ain't talking expense. Strike one, heat low in the way, you can't hit it. You know you wanna start a rally, but you better forget it. Strike two, off speed, same spot, your car looking. Get ready at the plate, this time you're not cooking. Strike three, swinging out of the zone. You ain't even touch it first. Tell me how they gonna drive you home. Walk it back, looking like we ain't cool then. The game's over, might as well put them back to the bullpen, oh yeah.
That's right. And we are bringing it back to the bullpen like we do every Monday through Friday. I'm Brett Chansey. He's Mike Stanton. Look, we've been doing this show for 3 seasons. Now we've joined the Locked On Network, the #1 sports podcasting network. But between us, we have over 2 decades on the mic. Mike has 19 years in the bigs. I'm your local expert, and we offer you a show unlike any other. We're going to hit a few topics today. Zach Wheeler was not happy with being pulled early, but how do you define early? Now, Savali and Contreras were both suspended for 7 games for the brawl in Boston. We'll talk about that, little deeper implications there from MLB. And then the Yankees captain speaks. Mike?
Yeah.
You know, the whole captain mantra started with Derek Jeter. Then they named Aaron Judge the captain. Mm-hmm. He doesn't typically say a whole lot. He is a leader by example. So this speaks volumes to what he thinks is going on in the clubhouse.
Well, we don't know how much he actually talks behind closed doors. Okay.
True.
And you know, it's not like Aaron Judge is a 3 or 4 year player. This dude is a veteran now. He has been the captain for a while. And listen, it takes some time to kind of figure out what kind of captain you're going to be. You know, Derek Jeter, when he got it, it was actually after I left. He didn't want it. That was not something, and it wasn't a situation. And usually when it's with the Yankees, with most Yankees teams, getting the captainship isn't something that you really need. It's kind of more of an honor type thing. And you know, it wasn't until we saw Jeter later in his career that he actually started saying some things publicly, because he was always a guy that, you know, he really didn't get interviewed that much after games because he never said anything. It was always cliches. It was always short. And so the beat writers in the media usually just went somewhere else. Aaron Judge is kind of the same thing. And that's the whole idea. It's not to create controversy. It's to help calm things down. And Aaron Judge has definitely been a very, very good captain. But you know, him being I think part of what happened here, him being on the IL and not coming back anytime soon, I think he's looking for a way to try and help. And I think one of the ways he's trying to do this is, you know, he wants to rattle their cages a little bit. Now, there's a lot of things going on behind closed doors also, but we'll get to that in just a minute.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I think the quote that stands out the most is he said, guys have to remember every single day we're here to win a World Series, do your job. And that goes back to what you've been talking about as, you know, when you were a member of the Yankees clubhouse, that's what you expected. You didn't come to the ballpark because you're trying to win a game. You came to the ballpark because at the end of the season, you expected to be champions.
Right.
You expected to be a champion that day and to become a champion at the end of the season. And I think, see, there are certain players that when they say stuff and like out in the media, some players, it rubs people the wrong way. Manny Machado has a way, you know, I like Manny Machado.
Yeah.
He comes across as kind of a guy who's a little bit of a jerk. I don't know really what term to use, but it's a little brash.
Yeah.
And there isn't like a whole lot of respect in that. But when Aaron Judge does it, it's almost like when a father disciplines a son. It's that, you know, when you told the show how Bobby Cox, I believe, said, we can't have that. I mean, it was just a simple, you were like, you knew you were being put on notice. And that's where I think Aaron Judge is. And that's why I have a lot of respect for him.
Yeah. And he's one of those guys, since we don't hear from him a whole lot, and probably his teammates don't hear, you know, other than probably on a personal one-on-one situation. he's not a guy that's going to call a whole lot of team meetings because listen, if you have team meetings and you're rah-rahing and you're talking smack all the time, then all of a sudden it doesn't carry as much weight. But when you're not, now all of a sudden it carries a lot more weight. And Aaron Judge, and I think that this is probably overblown a little bit. I think that once when Aaron Judge says something, of course it's going to be national news. And I don't know if this is how the players are going to take this. I'm sure he's going to have some of his teammates that kind of take offense to this, which is okay. Because like I said, I think this is he's kind of trying to rattle their cage since he's not on the field to do it himself. Now he's got to do it a different way. But I think this was it was more of a focus situation. We want to make sure that you got your mind on the right thing. I'm not in the dugout. I'm not on the field because it's one thing for someone to talk, like a manager to say something. It doesn't carry the same weight when one of your peers, one of your teammates, or your captain actually says something. And that's so important to have team leaders, even if there's no captain, there's team leaders that can talk and carry weight. But I just think this is one of those things that Judge is frustrated. This isn't something that just came up in the last game or two. Okay, this is something that's been going on for a while.
Oh, yeah.
They got off to a really hot start once Judge went down. But, the last week or plus, things have not been going good offensively. And I think this was just one of those things that he's just trying to get everyone refocused on what they're trying to do. Now, I said that there's other things going on, and there is. This team has been devastated by food poisoning. Not sure where they got it, but there are guys that haven't been able to play. There are guys that trying to play through it, and this has been going on for the last several days. So
really,
you can understand that why things have gone south a little bit because you don't know exactly how severe some of these guys, how severe the sickness really is. And listen, I don't know if you've ever had food poisoning, but I mean it can knock you on your butt for 5, 6, 7 days because it's sick. Depending on how sick you get, it also just takes all your energy and it takes some time to kind of get your legs back underneath you.
Yeah, definitely. Judge did reveal that he had spoken privately to the players. Mm-hmm. He also said that a larger meeting is coming, and he wasn't going to share details. He just said, I think the guys see it. Now, over the losing streak, it's almost like they've been the bad news bears because in the field, 8 errors, 15 unearned runs, defensive breakdowns. You mentioned the food poisoning. Aaron Boone's basically been forced to shuffle this defense. Yeah. Caballero's even been in center field. So look, this is why you play 162, kids, because you know what happens sometimes.
Yeah, there was a stat I heard earlier today about the 15 errors and the 15 runs and the 7-game losing streak, 7 games in a row.
Right.
It's only been done like one time, and it was like the 89 Pirates or something like that. That's how bad this week has been. It has been a really, really bad week. But, everybody gets healthy again. They start, you know what they need to do? You want to know what really is going to make this team feel better? Win a game. One game.
Yeah.
Win one game. Everybody takes a breath. You go back out. You get a good night's sleep. You get a good meal in you. Maybe, hopefully, you can get a good meal in you, and then things will be fine. But when we say it was a bad week, it was a historically bad week for a team that doesn't usually go through that. There's a big difference between the 2026 New York Yankees and the 1989 Pittsburgh Pirates.
Huge difference. Huge difference. Right. One of those will sustain themselves over the long term. A couple last quotes before we get to our next segment. Judge's diagnosis, he said, guys are just trying to do too much. We've talked about that. And his favorite quote, trying to hit a grand slam with nobody on. So we'll leave it at that. In our next segment, we're going to talk about this big, not just brush up, but brawl in Boston and how a pitcher was suspended the same amount of games as the batter that threw the helmet at him. We'll talk about it next. Hello, everybody. Thank y'all for tuning in to Back to the Bullpen. I want to tell you about our friends at Amazon. We want to thank you for stopping by. Look, this limited break is brought to you by Amazon, and back to school season is here. Spend less on your kids with Amazon. We all know how crazy back to school shopping is. And look, it starts with a few items on the list, and suddenly you're shopping supplies and clothes. It's more, it's lunch, it's tech gear. At the end of the day, you're like, it adds up so fast. And then when you buy clothes for your back to school kid, in 2 weeks, they go through a growth spurt and you're right back from square one. And sometimes you generally feel like they're growing faster than your budget and you can't keep up. Well, and then there's teachers. Now, being a teacher, I try my best to give y'all a supply list that works, but sometimes you don't realize how much your child needs until you get to the end of the list. So every dollar you spend matters. And because every dollar you don't spend on them is a dollar you haven't spent on them. So remember, spend less by going to Amazon. Shop back to school Amazon and spend less on your kids.
Welcome back into Back to the Bullpen, presented by the Locked On Network. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the suspensions that were handed out today, how we feel about that. And Brett, why don't you give us what the situation is here?
So Wilson Contreras, Cade Savali, Miles Mikolas, and Michaelis. You know what? I want to say, I don't know why I want to put an E in there. Miles Michaelis and Nate Eaton. Here are their suspensions. Contreras and Savali both got 7 games. Michaelis 5 games, Eaton 3 games. Now, normally the player who charges the mound receives a harsher punishment.
Right.
Instead, MLB decided that both players were going to be suspended equally, which tells you and me that the league views Savali's words as being just as responsible as the altercation for the altercation as Contreras' reaction. I don't know that I agree with that.
Yeah,
Mike, what do you think?
They're saying that Cavalli was the instigator. Now, there was something that happened earlier in the game, and it was Wilson Contreras, after flying out in his first at-bat, when he ran back to the dugout, he ran very close. Some people even thought that he made contact with Cade Cavalli. Okay. And Cade kind of took offense to it. Now, Wilson did, after he passed him, he kind of looked back and kind of waved at him like, my bad. But I don't think Cavalli saw it. Okay. And so, but still, he, and listen, Wilson is a very emotional player. We talked about this last night or yesterday. He's a very emotional player. He's got a lot of things going on in his head right now with all the devastation in Venezuela. And I can't sympathize with him, but I can empathize with him. But it's still one of those things. But he gets under a lot of people's skin. That's who he is as a player. It's part of his. That's part of his shtick. Heck, he even gets under his own teammates' players' skin sometimes. So, so Cavalli took offense for him to getting too close. I know for years ago it was hitters do not run over the mound. You go around the mound, and we saw an altercation years ago when who was it? A-Rod. Alex Rodriguez ran over a mound, and it was a veteran pitcher, and they actually had words about it. That was just one of those unwritten rules that you just don't do. So Wilson Contreras, he kind of started this altercation. Okay. Cavalli strikes him out with a curveball, and then he says he gets 7-game suspension for saying 3 words. That's it. Not a curse word. Didn't call him anything. He said, "Sit down, boy." That was it. Okay. Now, it was asked after the game if Wilson Contreras took the boy. Now, this is where we are in our world today. If he took that statement, if he took that racially, And Wilson
Right.
said, "No, I didn't. I did not take that. I didn't feel like that was a racial slur or anything like that. That's just something that happens in the heat of the moment." So you got someone that charges the mound, someone that throws the helmet at Cavalli, and you get the same number of games. This makes no sense. Listen, Major League Baseball gets a lot of things right. Okay, this is one thing. For decades, they have swung and missed. Okay. And it seems like it happens quite often. Now, you don't have as many suspensions going on because you don't have as many ejections as you used to.
Right.
But 7 games for both of these guys, when one charged the mound, one threw a helmet, and the other one said 3 words. I mean, that's absurd. Now, the other side of this, Miles Michaelis and Nate Eaton, we don't know what they said or what they did. Okay, we didn't see the reports, but for a situation that there weren't any punches thrown, those seem to be a little excessive also. But my biggest thing is, for a guy that didn't even get kicked out in Cade Cavalli, he gets 7-game suspension. That's absurd. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. That makes no sense because he stayed in the game, right?
He didn't get kicked out. He didn't get kicked out.
I mean,
Actually,
it
he
would
ended
have
up
been
pitching a great game.
Yeah, and that probably motivated him. I remember, gosh, I've had coaches in the past, and they're like, "Be careful how emotional you get and how much you go at them, because if they get an advantage and get a leg up on this game, they're going to make you pay for it." And I have had to pay for it. I've talked smack early in games, and
sure,
and
that's usually
it rarely works out for you. But
you go back 10 years, that's where it was all done.
Right.
You say things on the mound, and there's always been, the satellite dishes with the microphone to get the on-field conversations.
Right.
The sounds of the game,
right,
crack of the bat, that kind of stuff. But this is ridiculous. I mean, so
Yeah,
we can't. So you can't say anything in the heat of the battle. So all of a sudden, do we need to start paying attention to what's said in the dugout? Because there wasn't even a curse word here.
Yeah, I mean, I think had it been more salacious, had it been more obvious, like something derogatory, right?
Yeah.
That would make sense. And this is where, I feel like sometimes we punish players so that the other players don't feel so punished. Or, well, maybe they'll understand that we have some sympathy. And you and I talked about Wilson Contreras, and you talked about leading into this about his emotions and where he is. And I completely understand that. He's a human. He has got raw emotions, and things are flying. But even in the heat of the moment, I was taught growing up, be angry, but sin not. In other words, be angry, but don't make an action out of your anger. And I mean, should Savali have not said that? Of course. But could Contreras have just walked and maybe even said something to him, but kept walking? But he was very aggressive. He was very intentional.
He went to the mound. Now, it wasn't.
It took, here's the thing.
There weren't any punches thrown.
No, but it took several people to hold Contreras back.
Right.
Now, towards the end, Savali was like, "Let's go, dude." Like, he was like, he was defending himself. But even that, Mike, he wasn't thrown out of the game. Right. So so my thing is, you've got to go back and look at what happened in the game. Okay, well, the guy stayed in. Okay, maybe give him a 1 or 2 game suspension.
Yeah.
But a 7 and 7, I just think that's a little absurd.
I will say this: the 7-game suspension for a starting pitcher, and I'm not backing off this because I still think 7 games is absurd for a guy that didn't get kicked out and didn't do anything other than say 3 words without any. It wasn't a racial slur. It wasn't anything like that. Just out of a raw emotion. Okay. I think that's absurd. But the reason a starting pitcher gets more is because he has to miss a start.
Well, that's true. That makes sense.
That's what 7 games are for. Because Wilson Contreras, if he had now listen, all these are probably going to be reduced. Okay. For Wilson Contreras, 7 days is 7 games. So he's going to miss 7 games compared to Cade only missing 1. So I mean
Right.
but again, I just think that this is just way too severe for something that really didn't happen. And I just have a tough time with the idea that you give the same number of games, because also, by the way, it's supposed to be unpaid. So this
Yeah.
is, and there's also undisclosed fines on all of these guys.
Yeah. And
So
they,
I mean,
right.
it's
Right.
just I just this is one of those places that I think Major League Baseball gets it wrong seemingly every time. Not every time, but seemingly every time that they do this. And I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to make sure that it's a deterrent for anybody else doing it. But listen, you're playing a game. There's emotions. There's going to be things happen, things said, and you have to figure out how. I mean, I don't know. I'm just, this one seemed
Oh,
over the
no.
top to me.
No. Yeah. I saw that, and I was a little taken back by 7 games. Well, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, in our last segment, we're going to hit on Zach Wheeler, and we're going to talk about. I think there's some good reason why Don Mattingly pulled him, but I also think there's a good reason why Zach Wheeler would want to stay in. We'll talk about that next.
Welcome back to the Bullpen, presented by the Locked On Network. Philadelphia Phillies, this is a hot team. One of the reasons they've been hot is because Zach Wheeler has been outstanding since missing the first month and coming back from the thoracic outlet surgery that he had. There was supposed to be a pitching matchup between him and Paul Skeens. Well, it didn't really work out that way. Neither guy actually pitched 5 innings, and Zach Wheeler went 4 2/3. But Zach came out and said that he wasn't really happy with being pulled from the game.
Yeah, I mean, I can see right off the bat why he did it. I mean, he's coming off of an injury, 104 pitches. It makes sense. But I can also see the side of it from Zach Wheeler's, perspective. He absolutely is a gamer, and he wants to be in there. I mean, especially Mike, for a guy that missed as much baseball as he missed, he wants to be in there. And I mean, honestly, Mike, isn't this the kind of pitcher, the kind of attitude that you want on the team, rather than a guy saying, okay, that's cool, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You want, especially when you're talking about an ace, your ace, one of the best pitchers in Major League Baseball, that you want him to stay on the mound, and you don't want him looking into the dugout. Okay, I've got 100 pitches. You guys need to take me out. And really, what he's upset about is he wanted to try and get that third out, one more hitter to get that third out. Okay. He had a streak. I think it's 53 straight starts for him that he's gone at least 5 innings, which is pretty incredible. I mean, not a blow up start in that whole time. So that streak, obviously, and I don't think he's really thinking about that streak. I think it's more that he was also in line for his 9th win of the season. Well, he didn't get that either because he only went 4 2/3. But on Don Mattingly's side, he's looking at the big picture. I think that when Zach is looking, it's a little more focused on the win, on getting that, let me get that last out. Don Mattingly is more looking at the big picture about, he did miss a whole month of the season. He's thrown the ball well, but there was a lot of stress pitches in those 104 pitches in 4 2/3. He had 10 strikeouts, but he'd also given up like 9 hits. He'd given up 4 runs. I mean, it wasn't like he was out there just shoving left and right.
Right.
There was a little salt and pepper there. There was give and take. And so, I guess what the only issue I may have with this is that Zach actually went public with this. And it was actually in the interview, actually asked, have you talked to Don Mattingly about this? And he said no. Actually, he said nope. And asked if we were going to, and he goes, I don't know. But you know what? Listen, it's not up to Zach. As much as, and he said, and one of the other things that he said was he felt like he deserved that one extra chance to get that third out. And he had already given up a couple hits, I think 3 hits and a run that inning. The last hit was just a blooper. Okay, that's all understandable. And yeah, I want you to stay in the game, but Don Mattingly's the boss. Listen, you want to stay in the game, don't throw 104 pitches in 4 2/3.
Exactly. That is exactly right. But again, I like how he's showing fire, how he wants to be a leader. I mean, look, he's sitting back, and as a pitcher, you want your other pitchers doing well. But these starters, they are alpha personalities. And, Christopher Sanchez is getting all the headlines. Zach Wheeler wants to get some of that back himself, and not just for selfish reasons, but because he wants to contribute to the team. And I do believe too, there's a sense of responsibility to these pitchers. Now, definitely not at the level that someone like Nolan Ryan, where you don't dare go get him before 9 innings, because he would basically cuss you out if he thought you were trying to get him, because his job was to be on that mound, all 9 innings. That's why he went in there to pitch and put the uniform on. And so you've got to tip your hat to having guys like that in this game. But then again, you also have a game where arms are a lot more protected than they used to be.
Yeah.
I mean, we, see it in Houston. Christian Javier's coming back. He's going to go to a bullpen role. And, he just pitched 6 scoreless innings in his last rehab start. But the thing is, the Astros want to maximize how they use him.
Sure.
And so Don's probably like, I'm sure if he talks to him about it, he's like, look, it wasn't because I didn't think you could go. It's because I need you in October. And we've got a team that's going to go to the World Series and, all that stuff. So that's where I think maybe Zach Wheeler takes a step back and maybe in the long run realizes that. And hopefully, I don't think this is something that creates a rift, because Zach Wheeler's not a lightning rod. There are guys in the clubhouse that when they get upset and they start talking, they stir the pot, and you've been in the clubhouse with guys like that.
Sure.
So,
well, we just talked about one in the first segment here in Wilson Contreras. Wilson Contreras is one of those lightning rod type players, and I don't even think. And listen, Zach understands why he did it. It wasn't like, I can't believe this. This is absurd. They still ended up winning the game. I mean, there were a lot of positives that came out of this, and having 10 strikeouts when, what did he face? 14. He got 14 outs and he had 10 strikeouts. That's pretty amazing. But the problem with that is there's a whole lot of pitches that go with 10 strikeouts, and I think that the frustration of him coming out is warranted, just simply because he didn't want to come out and he thought he still felt good. He thought he was still doing his job. But Don Mattingly absolutely did his job in trying to protect Zach from Zach himself.
Right. And, at the end of the day, too, it's not like he went out there and blasted Don Mattingly, right? It's not like he totally disrespected him. And that's when I think you get into a problem, because you've seen that. I've seen players come out and speak angrily, either about a coach or a manager, and then they build a reputation. And but man, the Phillies are just a strong team. Between the Phillies, the Braves, and the Dodgers, and the Brewers, I mean, it seems like the National League playoffs, what people might say, Mike, when you get to the NLCS, is this is the real World Series, because the American League outside of the Rays, I mean, has been very mediocre.
Yeah, and listen, I still think that we discussed Aaron Judge in the first segment of this podcast, and I think that the Yankees are going to be there, because remember, Max Fried is right around the corner. You make the playoffs, and with that rotation, I don't care what kind of lineup you have. When you have Max Fried, you have Garrett Cole, you have Rodon, you have Schlittler. I mean, you have basically 1 and 1A and 1B and 1C all the way through their rotation. So I'm not ready to give it to the National League, and I think the American League playoffs is they may be very different games, but I think they're going to be entertaining too because the teams are so evenly matched.
So, a little tidbit I want to share with you because I saw this randomly on someone's X feed. Carlos Rodon and his wife were at a charity event recently, and they asked his wife, "What hitter do you fear for your husband to face the most?" Who do you think he said? Or who do you think she said?
I have no idea.
Left-hander Yordan Alvarez. He goes,
that's on left. Yeah.
Well, you know what's funny? He goes, Yordan, really? She goes, yeah, last time you faced him, you gave up a home run.
That was in the playoffs.
I thought that was a little, I was like, oh man, dang, she got you on that. But I just thought that was interesting. And, to wrap this up, Yordan versus Junior Caminero on 4th of July weekend.
That's right.
So with that, hey, y'all, happy 4th of July. We want y'all to have a safe and happy holiday. We are unapologetically patriotic here. 250 years. Happy birthday, America. I believe the greatest country on God's green earth. Mike, you have any parting words for 4th of July for our fans?
Same thing. Everyone have a wonderful Independence Day. Have a safe Independence Day. There's a lot of great baseball that's going on, but you know what? Get outside, have some apple pie, cook some burgers, do the things that'll the free stuff that we get to do in this country. So enjoy yourselves, have fun, and remember what this celebration is all about.
That's right. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. For myself and Mike and everybody at Back to the Bullpen, y'all have a good one, and happy birthday, America.
Adios.